Interested in how cheese played a part in American food history? From blending into savory Welsh Rarebit to enhancing delicate cheese tarts. Ready to melt away? Cheese souffle to start us off fancy and proper because, after all, who does not love having this for lunch? Across different eras of food in the USA, it has taken on form after form. Incorporating different kinds of cheeses like Parmigiano or Reggiano into the dish, it was a popular sight at many restaurants and in homes generally. French Americans in particular adored it, and it was a favorite at fusion restaurants across the 90s. Having retained some of its success but not all, it still is quite present, but more so as a restaurant item. Home-baked soufflés that used common superstore ingredients and unique variations are now a thing of the past. Trends change over time, and for America, cheese soufflé started to not be something you would expect at family tables usually, except maybe on rare occasions. Cheese straws come from pretty humble beginnings when compared to the soufflé because these were just a method of preservation. People in the South went crazy over cheese to the point where they would usually keep a pretty decent stock of it. Heat was going to be a problem though, because it would often melt, and people would preserve cheese by making dough with cheese and spices. The vertical thin shape made them really portable, so they made for great comfort food. 30 to 40 was not exactly a surprising amount of cheese straws to have in the fridge. As far as baked treats go, cheese straws were absolutely delicious and made it all the way to White House cookbooks. Surprisingly, it is not a handy meal people make anymore, even though there would be platters full at many dinners. Welsh Rarebit is another step that America took when it comes to comfort cooking because this was just a delectably thick melted cheese sauce on toast. That made it such an addictive snack that it went beyond simply being good and became something people just regularly had every day like coffee and muffins are nowadays. People would get incredibly fancy with this, going as far as applying wine or ale and mustard blended with cheese to create a bechamel sauce. Historically, this has been in cookbooks in America like since the mid-1700s, so it definitely had a fair time in the sun, but nowadays you would not find this as a comfort snack or breakfast food. American cuisine later started incorporating cheese more frequently in meat-based dishes such as meatloaf, burgers, and pizzas, although some may still remember the original uses. Pimento cheese specials were a simple spread that was as beloved in Southern America as the others on the list so far. Pimento peppers and shredded cheese were all you needed to have yourself a volatile spread flavor-wise. Citizens of the state easily remember when this got popular enough to start being sold in canned variants. Pimento cheese specials were usually referred to as the South's very own pâté. Flavors just made sense no matter the combination. And before you ask yourself, yes, it was very popular with sandwiches. Toast or flatbreads or lasagna, this went with everything and it elevated most things it was mixed in. Pimento peppers are a bit of an uncommon ingredient nowadays that do not see much use. However, this was a very warm moment in America's cheese history that might make a comeback. Limburger sandwiches consisted of Limburger cheese fillings and sandwiches, which might surprise you if you know what Limburger is. Stink is the most commonly associated trait with the cheese. So, why is it so popular in Wisconsin? The 1930s to the 1970s. America was a much different beast food-wise than it is now, and people actually enjoyed ripened cheeses a lot. Limburger had a uniquely strong fragrance to some and smell to others. Strangely appetizing to most in the state, it was available in most taverns in Wisconsin. Onions and mustard were a common addition, as well as typical spices and peppers. Pennsylvania also had some love for the sandwich, but now you would not find it in either state reliably enough. Melted cheese spread over sandwiches was the bomb then though, especially if this would be in the fridge. Cheese fondue took it a few notches further than just spreads and fillings. This was an entire melted pot of cheese that would be served alongside toasted bread or garlic bread to be used as a dipping. Explaining the exact sensation of cheese melted just hot enough on crispy fresh bread sprinkled blending together is hard. Seeing why this became so famous in the early days is not a tough ask at all on the other hand. Starting out with just bread, even items like burgers and pizzas were among people's top choices. Cheese fondue dominated America's dipping scene for a good while. Presently, the trend for cheese fondue died down considerably, especially as the nation became more health conscious. Having pots of melted cheese were not ideal anymore, despite the irresistible taste that made it so hard to say no. Cottage cheese salad being next up after we ended the last segment on America becoming health conscious is ironic. But yes, this was actually a very common diet food. Even if you were not dieting, people would eat it simply for either having a healthy, tasty meal or for the overall benefit. Summer vegetables like cherry tomatoes and green onions were used. Onions and cucumbers made for a very great meal to eat if you felt like turning your life around next week, or if you needed to lose a few inches off your waist before an event. Calorically speaking, this is lower than what you would expect despite using a lot of cottage cheese. All-rounders are appealing, so anyone can figure why this became a staple. However, people turned to things like Russian salads and the like eventually. Cheese balls would actually typically be served with cottage cheese salad as an appetizer since they were easy to prepare in bulk and delicious but light. Wisconsin also loved these, so if you are watching from there, you might find new lunch ideas here. Game nights or movies, holiday celebrations, or get-togethers, cheese balls were the appetizer. Nuts would also be included, or crackers, so people once again customized this across the states, which is something America seems to be fond of. Funnily enough, public opinion changed on them in between 20 years each time. Once they were very popular in the 30s to 50s, and then they were considered too much from the 70s to the 90s. The early years of the 2000s had a neutral take on cheese balls, as it is a snack people have largely forgotten. Cheese Blintzes prove that cheese is something that can happily make a place for itself in the world of desserts, in more ways than the stereotypical cake here and there. Flour-egg mixtures, along with the creaminess of milk, made for an amazing batter. Essentially, you can imagine a layered cheese pancake because it would be fried in butter and stacked before topping it off with a ricotta cheese filling. Each and every one of them was a mouth-watering ingredient which made for an overall familiar sensation but entirely new and amazing taste. Dessert or breakfast would not matter because cheese Blintzes worked as both depending on the filling's sweetness. Most houses always went extra. America eventually went back to its normal pancakes and syrup routine in the later decades, but this was an imaginative idea that could have stayed longer. Cheese quiches should not be anything new, if you have ever noticed America's pie obsession. Cheese that would be loaded into a pie crust filled with a custard mix of eggs and chives, along with basic ingredients like flour and milk or cream. Combining it all together led to an incredible taste held in an amazing sensation. Crunchy and delightful, the pie felt amazing to eat, while the cheese tasted out of this world. Consequently, it became a favorite in both restaurants and households. Many family dinners have been saved by a good cheese quiche. Oven-having homes would usually learn to make this too. Trends were soaring, but sadly not forever because America never stops its eternal search for the next pie. Nowadays, it is hard to find it in house tables, however, the piece of history when it was popular is special. Cheese puffs are pretty similar to cheese balls a bit further back on the list, but these are cheese-packed pastries which are baked until a crisp golden brown color. Cheese puffs have many different variations like cheese curls or the straight-shaped version, but the most iconic was definitely the original ball-shaped puff. Wisconsin claims it invented this, but it has never been confirmed. Either way, the dish is a welcome addition to the USA's already impressive cookbook. Perfect to snack on, no matter what age you were, they were a snack that brought generations closer together. Yes, the younger ones in particular loved it, but no adult can honestly say they have never had a cheese puff phase. Sadly, the phase in general is long gone because now they are sold as packaged corn dough puffs. Cheese logs were actually often considered to be the infamous stepbrother of cheese balls. Blue cheese spreads with pecans and different dry toppings as well as hearty seasonings, setting the stage for an infectious comfort food. Holiday get-togethers featured these as a snack on the menu. For so many years, it is hard to keep count. Retro versions of the dish even involved bits or strips of bacon packed into the spread, which only made it more of an American favorite. Family traditions held on to this one dearly throughout the 90s, especially during times like the Great Depression, where it was all about what you could make with what little you had. Now, presently, it is a ghost from the past, and not many families still remember how to make an authentic cheese log that could impress the neighbors. Cheese wafers were another snack that was impossible to miss at most family tables or eat-outs of any kind. Light, thin, but flaky and fluffy. Cheese wafers hit all the right spots to make your five senses say, "Yup, I'm eating all of that." Cheese wafers can be best described as cheese cookies or thin cheese crackers which were made from dough kneaded into a cookie shape and baked. Time-efficient and easy to make in the dozens made this a beloved choice for any kind of family, especially in the southern parts of America. To add some variety to the dish, folk would sometimes add paprika or different peppers to enhance the savory flavor. Despite its solid stay in the history of America's snacks, it faded away or became commercialized. Original recipes that involved making them from scratch are a thing of the past. Cheese enchiladas would be tossed, fried, and baked with everything from red sauces to cheddar cheese and mushrooms. Every ingredient typically associated with pizza has found its way into some cheese enchilada recipes. Iowa particularly loves the flavor bomb that this dish is because it has spice, it has gooey sweet cheese, and it has the perfect amount of flavor from seasonings. Of course, it was going to be a mainstay in many places besides just Iowa. Most of the items on the list so far are similar to appetizers or snacks, however, this was its own meal. Best part about it is that it worked with any kind of cheese store-bought or farm-grown. In fact, experimenting with cheeses added variety to a beloved dish in the 50s. Sad to see it go as just another cheesy dish from the last century. Cheese-stuffed celery will definitely raise your eyebrow because at least the rest have some logic to them, but celery? Frankly speaking, the dish was not received positively in its very earliest days. Crazy ideas like vegetables and cheese definitely had to grow on people, but slowly and steadily, it did make an impression. Economic perils would make their minds more open to it, though, because it saw a spike in popularity following the stock market fiasco. People were aware that, on its own, this did not exactly make anyone's stomach hungry. Bacon and tomatoes or fried onions were usual for this dish, and it definitely worked better with them. Mimicked the taste of a burger in some way for a few people, but it is not hard to see why this dish faded away from family tables when times were better. Cheese canapes continue the trend of this list's cheese-based starters, as it is another appetizer that was elevated for the middle-class American taste buds via cheese. In fact, they were pretty popular at fancy upper-class parties because the cheese biscuits were perfect to munch on mid-conversation. Cheese canapes would be made up of open-faced biscuits with garlic herbs and cheddar cheese or cream cheese. Taste-wise, it resembled a little explosion of cheese in your mouth with just the perfect amount of crunch, similar to nachos. Even fancier variants of the dish would involve smoked salmon or onion jam served alongside with it. When used in combination with other foods like that, it stood out but not long enough to stay in recent memory. Cheese sandwich loaf is exactly what it sounds like, with a lovely helping of cream cheese to add to the experience. Cheese lovers watching right now must have been wondering when a sandwich would make its debut. Let's just say we saved the best for last, and that is not an exaggeration because this sandwich was downright heavenly. Arguably the king of the pile, and that is one extremely competitive title to claim, versions of this sandwich would still influence loaves and other sandwiches in recent history. One for every kind of festivity you can think of or on boring Saturday nights. Cheddar cheese was a very popular pick, but people went with many, and it gave each state its own flavor profile. Nowadays, it is hard to find the exact version of this you would see back in those days because it changed heavily later. Cheese tarts are another entry in the dessert section for this list. Cherries, cherry custard, or jam would even be popular toppings for these. Japanese-American restaurants featured their own variants called Hokkaido cheese tarts. French-American restaurants, on the other hand, took to making this a staple for dessert menus. Meanwhile, the South would be cooking up its own cheesy storm. Graham cracker crumbs would also be used to add a crunch factor to the dish. As you can tell, it found a lot of love and experimentation alike. Far and wide, these were very adored entrees, munchies, or hors d'oeuvres for any decent dinner or party. Nowadays, you would not find them in the menu for events because palates have changed widely. The 1930s to 1980s were times of great change in America, but their love for cheese is pretty loud and clear. Cheese stuffed peppers flipped the script from ideas like pimento cheese specials, which had peppers involved but not like this. Peppers would be loaded with a cheese filling in this case and baked to make for an entirely new culinary experience. Part of the era of experimentative cooking in a craze to grasp the next new trend. People would use anything from bell peppers to sweet ones or yellow peppers. Definitely a dish that saw heavy change in a short time frame, however. While it got points for creativity, it did not last. Stuffed peppers were not exactly too new of an idea in the States, but no one had thought to use cheese fillings. Maybe they should make a comeback? Or maybe we take the lesson that stuffed food can be good like stuffed crusts and be glad people moved on. Cheese Danishes took a beloved classic even further beyond with this combination. Danishes were already commonplace enough in the States. Typically, they are yeast-leavened dough puff pastries. Part of many people's go-to order before work, it was common to pick up a Danish with your coffee. Cheese Danishes add a simple touch to this dish, but that is because it does not need much improvement to begin with. You would be surprised just how much a good cheese filling can do for a dish in terms of comfortability and taste. Plus, any good chef always knows when they are going overboard with an idea. Sadly, it is not served in bakeries or breakfast joints much anymore, or even served as a pastry at family tables. We would really like to see this one make a return. Do you think these cheese dishes should return back to our dinner tables? If so, like the video and subscribe for more.